Well, for some reaction on this judgment, we're now joined by South African Communist Party Central Committee member of Communications, Dr. Alex Mashilo. Dr. Mashilo, I would imagine that the reaction that we saw Mayor Hani display is perhaps the sentiment that you're all feeling within the South African Communist Party.
It is sickeningly disappointing and exceedingly so, as our General Secretary has said. If you follow the text of the judgment delivered, except for the caution that we made to the Constitutional Court through both our written and oral submission, that the assassination of Chris Hani, the husband, the father, the uncle, you name it in the family, and the relative, the General Secretary of the South African Communist Party, and a member of the National Executive and Working Committees of the ANC, was also an attempt to assassinate the transition in South Africa from the racist apartheid regime to a democratic dispensation that we achieved afterwards, after massive amounts of efforts by the leadership of the ANC led by President Nelson Mandela, that of the South African Communist Party led by Joe Slovo, to try and cool the country as the right-wingers had almost succeeded to plunge South Africa into the state of civil war. So that had to be taken into account. When a prisoner is in prison, and this prisoner applies for parole, you cannot disregard the nature of the crime committed by that particular criminal. Janusz Walus was defending the apartheid system, which was declared by the United Nations to be a crime against humanity. So except for that caution, which the court did concede that it had to be taken into account, there is nothing whatsoever in the judgment that shows that the Chris Hani family and the SACP made both written and oral submissions through our legal team led by senior advocate Sekakani. Throughout the judgment, it is as if when you look at that text, the Constitutional Court says not only is Janusz Walus the victim, but is the only victim. So the entire judgment is about Janusz Walus, and of course critical about the Ministers of Justice and Correctional Services, and nothing about the submissions made by the SACP and the Hani family. We expressed ourselves rejecting the so-called apology by Janusz Walus because, having been at the parole board, we knew and we saw that this was nothing but a tick box exercise aimed at attracting parole when the time for this convicted assassin for parole comes, such as the Constitutional Court did take it upon itself to force the minister to grant him parole within 10 days.
So what would have been the appropriate course of action? That life means life, that he would have spent the rest of his life in jail with no possibility of parole?
No. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission, to which he applied for amnesty, was set up on the basis of full disclosure of the truth. Having failed to make full disclosure of the truth, together with his co-conspirator at Clive Debilus, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission denied them amnesty. To this day, we don't know who working with them or working for them or working for their plan, which the Constitutional Court acknowledged, took weeks and weeks to produce, took the murder weapon from the military armory. Where is that person? What has happened to that person? So in the case of Chris Hani here, there's been no justice at all. It is as if the assassin has been violated, while in fact the assassin violated our transition from apartheid to the democratic dispensation and assassinated Chris Hani, the leader of the party and the ANC, and the husband of Dimpho Hani and the father of his children.
The Constitutional Court judges didn't write the Constitution. Their job is just to interpret it. Are we saying that it's been misinterpreted or badly written?
Peter, it will not be entirely correct to say that they were interpreting the Constitution. They also made use of an apartheid-era judgment in a matter relating to an appointment in a particular entity by someone who had applied and made use of that apartheid-era judgment as part of the basis for their argument. There are many things that went through that particular judgment. Of course, they insisted that that judgment, which was delivered during the apartheid era, was sustained beyond the apartheid regime.
Human rights lawyer Richard Spoor spoke on our channel earlier today, and he said that the Constitutional Court came up with the right decision here, and that when you examine the law as it's written, the Constitutional Court had no other choice but to rule in the way that it did, and that it needed to be devoid of any political or emotional charge.
No, I worked with Richard Spoor when I was in the trade union movement. I disagree with him. I doubt if he had time to look at the judgment. In fact, the Constitutional Court presented options in that judgment and then chose one of those particular options. To the extent that you present options and you choose one, it shows that you had options. If I may say this, the Constitutional Court referred to an option to replace or to substitute a decision, an administrative action. When they made that referral to that option, they made use of an apartheid-era judgment. They also said the Constitutional Court could direct the minister to make a particular. There were options in that judgment. They happened to choose one option. They could have chosen the other option. So there were options in that particular judgment. And let us say this, because it is easy for someone, and I'm not referring to Richard Spoor. I have listened to radio, I have listened to television. I've been handling communication on this judgment for almost 13 years now. And I want to say this because this is a warning to our fellow South Africans. They should know that this matter was beyond the application for parole by the convicted assassin who came from Poland and assassinated Chris Hani in cold blood. It was more than a case of the Minister of Justice and Correctional Services on the one hand, supported by the SACP.
Dr. Mashilo, are you still there?
SACP and the Chris Hani family and the assassin on the judgment, there will be a before and after. He was murdered ruthlessly in South Africa. And I can tell you, if those murderers can be arrested and they can be sent to jail, the first thing they will do after arriving in jail is to look at the procedure for parole and behave in such a way that on the day they become eligible to be considered for parole, they will tick all the boxes. There is no longer maximum sentence in South Africa. If on the day of parole, you must be considered for parole and given that particular parole merely because you ticked the boxes, and part of which you ticked because you were pretending. You tick those boxes through pretensions, like the so-called apology, which the Hani family rejected. It was not an apology, but a pretension to tick all the boxes. Tomorrow there will be crime, there will be an assassination, there will be a murder, there will be a killing occurring in South Africa. We will all come to the television station, on radio, on newspapers calling for maximum sentence. That will be nothing but theory backed by nothing in practice. As the day the murderers, the assassins, and the killers qualify for parole, they will have to go out if they manage to act sufficiently in prison, like the actors on the stage, in order to attract parole. That is the far-reaching implication of this judgment. And it is important to appreciate why this is taking South Africa.
Dr. Mashilo, I wish we could speak for longer. We've run out of time, but thank you for sharing your thoughts with us tonight.
Thank you very much.
All right, that's Dr. Alex Mashilo, who's with the South African Communist Party, a central committee member there of communication. expressing his and his party's thoughts about the judgment by the Constitutional Court today, saying that Janusz Walus must be released within the next 10 days.